Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata Protective Fabrics.
All right, we got the orchestra playing tonight too. That's good. Good evening, everybody. This is Ronnie K in New York. Welcome to the Backstep. My partner Tommy A. Those are the two gentlemen on the screen. You're going to meet them in about 30 seconds. Tommy, what's going on in New Mexico?
Not a lot. Holidays were good. How was everything in your world?
All holidays are great. 4th of July, Labor Day, everything was great. Hanukkah, Christmas, you name it, we did it. And New Year's as well. Okay. And at the wishes of Chief Leeb, yes, we're recording this in early December, and you're all going to see it in January. So we covered that right off the bat. I wanted to make sure we covered that.
So
everything's good.
We can't talk about the fact that you're a double dipper. You know, you're doing Hanukkah and Fran doing Christmas.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, it's just for her. It's double the gifts. I get nothing, but she gets twice the stuff. So she makes out. That's for sure. But let me introduce two guests. January being the fire prevention and protection issue traditionally for Fire Engineering Magazine. We wanted to bring on two current, we'll call them luminaries, if you will. With gentlemen who have a lot of experience, both I have a privilege of working for and working with every day at the job. I'm going how my screen is laid out. On my left is Assistant Chief Frank Leeb. Frank's been in the fire service well over 30 years, started as a volunteer, still a volunteer, right, Frank?
Yes, sir. And I'm a deputy assistant chief. Don't promote me. I'm a deputy assistant chief.
Deputy Assistant Chief, right, 2 stars and all that stuff. But Chief of Safety at the moment, held numerous positions, came up the ranks, and is, I always say when I look at a guy who's got 30 years in a career department and 30 in a volunteer, he's got 60 years of experience. That's kind of the way I look at it. The gentleman on my right is Deputy Chief Joe Jardin, who also held staff positions, Chief of Fire Prevention, Chief of Safety as well. And also active with the NFPA, and I think what lends itself to bringing them both on is they have that safety background, fire prevention, public education, fire safety, and not just working in the FDNY. Chief Jardin's been on NFPA committees for probably 25 years or better. Frank's getting his word out on cancer in the fire service, and then of course released the book on leadership. So it's not just they're here because they want to share, which is kind of neat. So basically, we talk about fire prevention and protection. Unfortunately, most of our fire service people are not necessarily interested in that. But tonight, after you watch this podcast and hear what these gentlemen have to say, you might change your tune a little bit. Way before Ben Franklin formed up that fire company in Philadelphia in 1736, he was writing papers on fire prevention. He was telling the people living in the towns and Philly area and everywhere else, you have to watch yourself. Fire can take your house down, it can kill you, it can do all this stuff. So way before we were responding, we were trying to prevent. So I think that of course, they lived in a combustible society back then. Not only with the houses wood, the sidewalks were wood, the chimneys. In some cases, the chimneys were hollowed out, and they were trees. They were wooden chimneys, and I think people had wooden teeth back then too, if I'm not mistaken, right? So Franklin did his thing, and he was prevention was first, and it still should be a priority in the nation's fire service. So I'm going to start. We're going to start the first question to you, Joe, and of course, after we ask one of you the question, and when you're done with your thoughts, we'd like the other chief to jump in as well. So the first question I have is, how can we change the culture of the fire service to truly believe that fire prevention, protection, public education are vital to the health and safety of the firefighters themselves on and off the fire ground?
Well, you really led with a ground ball there, Ron. Thanks. Culture change, right? I mean, just that topic of culture change related to the fire service is, is really challenging, right? The notion of changing organizational view on any topic, regardless of what it might be. You talked a little bit before about Frank's work with cancer risk reduction and an initiative which we undertook in 2017, and we're still working on. But that was steeped in the recognition of fostering culture change, right? To see results, and so it's not an easy thing, right? That's the point I'm trying to make. Thanks for that easy question, right? That doesn't have a really straightforward answer, but I think that the way to increase understanding, situational awareness is for senior leadership of the departments. Certainly, those who have the passion as chief officers or company officers, and have gained the appreciation for the benefits of taking fire prevention, as you pointed out, seriously, and then sharing that with the up and comers, the probationary or rookie firefighters, and at the scene of fires, like you would critique an operation, perhaps try to critique, what could have bitten us here. What if we didn't pay attention to our role, in the fire service in terms of fire prevention activities, building inspection or pre-planning or whatever, and trying to note things that would hurt us during operational periods. That's the way to do it. To drill on it, not ignore it. It's not the sexiest or the most exciting topic that obviously a fire officer wants to drill on or talk about, or the perception has to change a little bit as well, right? We generally contemplate safety, and we develop a mindset that we have to drill on or focus on things that are potentially catastrophic in nature, from just a focused view on collapse is going to kill us, flashover is going to kill us, a backdraft, that's going to kill us right then and there. But we don't, we don't necessarily, right? And it's something we have to kind of force ourselves to do, is think about, what if there is a locked or blocked exit that not only could have consequences to the general public, boy, what if we need a way out and that's blocked, and that's something we could have caught during our, if it's at a grocery store, just, we're going out to shop and buy the meal, right? That's something easy to note, let alone something we should be looking for during building inspection periods, or whatever the department calls those times it spends doing fire prevention type efforts. But it's just got to be added to the list of things that become routine, right? In terms of what we drill on, what we emphasize as part of our role as fire safety leaders, right, in the fire service. So.
Yeah, it's interesting because every year, like in my last job, every year in November, we'd lay out the following year's calendar for training, and it was all tactical stuff. When we did the fire prevention stuff, my guys were good. It was a small department. They went out, they did pub ed, they went to the schools, they did inspections, they helped the fire marshals, but it was never a thing on. Now that I'm thinking of it, it was never a segment. Like in this month, the IAFC started the stand down, the safety stand down. So we would take a little time out then, but it was never on the actual roster of what we're going to do that month. So, and that's probably where it needs to be. We have to take the time out to do it, but constantly, I agree with you. Frank, would you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, and I think so. You were drilling on tactics because firefighters, right? They want to drill on going to fires and what's going to kill them, and that's the tactical consideration. So fire prevention issues will kill you, right? When they're not maintained, or buildings are not built properly that give us an edge, right, to protect the residents. But I think to we got to flip the way we teach fire prevention, right? And say, okay, you think about Vandalia Avenue that killed 3 firefighters, and the building had a sprinkler on the top floor. Section valve was shut off. It was actually never turned on, right? When the building was built. You think of One Meridian Plaza where the sprinklers put the fire out. These are buildings where firefighters were killed. So kind of switch it to where they learn, buildings with self-closing doors or that are operational. You think of the Twin Parks fire and the lack of compartmentation. These are things that firefighters could relate to. So if you sprinkle in some of those, I like to talk about that it's the trail mix approach, right? We got to have the granola, right? But then let's sprinkle some M&Ms in there. So if we're going to talk about fire prevention, let's put it in a light that firefighters will be more receptive to it. And that is talking about it in a tactical sense where, hey, if this building had 2 exits, if there were 2 stairwells in this building, we have an attack and evacuation stair. We know that operationally, our operations go smoother when we have 2 stairwells. In our class 2 buildings that only have a single stairway, that's a challenge for us when we're talking about in some cases, the isolated buildings getting to the roof. So when we start to sprinkle those in and talk about them with a little bit of a tactical twist to it, firefighters will have a greater understanding of it. And obviously, as Joe pointed out, when we're out doing building inspection and out dealing with the public, that's a good time for us to be talking about that message, which we see it, when firefighters come, whether they come into the firehouse or they, residents come into the firehouse or open houses or where we're out. There's always a fire prevention message that we're giving to the public. So I think sprinkle in that, making more fire prevention issues where the firefighter could relate to it, because that firefighter that only has a couple of years on, he's worried about tactical stuff. He's not worried about he's not worried so much about fire prevention issues. Similar to that, he's not really worried about preventing cancer in himself, because he's worried about being tactically proficient on the fireground, because that's what could kill him 5 minutes from now.
So is this what we're talking about now? Does it or should it start right in the academy? Does it start at that level for, with our probationary or rookie firefighters, or does it start there? Does it continue as people get promoted up the ladder, whether it's volunteer or career, to go back and look at fire prevention again as part of the whole?
Yeah, and it does start there, right? So the new probies do have classes on fire prevention, and they do have classes on line of duty deaths and the history of the fire department. So they do have some of that in the fire academy now. Do they have as much as they do on ladder operations and engine operations? Of course not. But that continues, and then at every rank they get a little bit more. The lieutenant school gets, Flips gets a significant amount of building inspection information. A lot of that is testable for the lieutenant, so they start to get more of that information there. But I think Probie School does a really good job of how they disseminate that information to the firefighter by talking about some of the fire prevention issues that we may deal with and relating them to the fireground, which I think we need more of that.
Gotcha.
Frank, I got a question for you, and just to kind of give credit where credit's due. Ron was probably the first person that really tuned me into the impact code enforcement has on firefighter safety. But, taking it down to the company level, how do the pre-plans get scheduled? One of my pet peeves is the dollar stores being disposable buildings. If you got something built, say, out in Brooklyn, how does the company get notified that that's due for a pre-plan?
So that's a great question. A lot of the buildings, it's up to the companies to recognize those buildings. Certain building features or building construction types will be a notification to the company. Department of Buildings, when a permit is issued, we'd get the notification. Joe can probably speak about that more on the Fire Prevention Bureau side and how they would notify the line units, and then they'd go out and do the pre-plans after that. But that's a challenge, because a dollar store is a building that we wouldn't necessarily go out and pre-plan, and they're in every neighborhood.
Yeah, just looking at the construction features of those make me a little jumpy. And I think, Ron, you were the one that tuned me into one of the corporations basically budgets to burn, about 10 of them down a year, and then come in,
Well,
scrape the foundation and put a new one up.
Well, it was in terms of the fast food restaurants. You know, the fast food places. They're disposable buildings. You know, and they fail quick. They fail quick. I used the case of that the McDonald's that burned in Houston. You know, and it's probably 20 years ago already.
Yeah, Valentine's Day 2000.
Before the first funeral, the lot was plowed and graveled, and when they went by there with the funeral procession, it looked like there was never even a building there. So, and I've seen them a couple of years back. They were going to renovate. They were going to renovate a combination Dunkin' Donut, Baskin Robbins. There's a place where you can kill yourself in 15 minutes, right? A Dunkin' Donuts and a Baskin Robbins together, right? So they were going to renovate, and they put up a sign, "We're renovating." They knocked the building down and built a brand new building. Yeah. I mean, that was the renovation. They actually destroyed the building.
And I tell you, you really bring up a great point, because when we think about these cookie cutter type fast food restaurants that are definitely disposable buildings, right? They're going to do a design change and they knock it down. They put up a new building, and 2 weeks later they have a new building. That's in stark contrast to these new mega warehouses, these Amazon and Target and Walmart distribution centers that have these new sprinkler systems, these new type of sprinkler systems, where we should be pumping these systems for a half an hour minimum and not shutting them off, where it's about let the sprinkler systems do more of the work than we're used to doing. And you see the one that out in Indiana, the Walmart distribution center that the fire department was accused of shutting the sprinkler system off and letting the fire burn. That stock is disposable, where if we preserve the building, they're open a week later, as opposed to months later when they lose those structures. So that's a pretty good example of two very different buildings and the mindset on how we should be protecting those buildings.
Yeah, Joe, anything on the we're talking about construction now of two different types. Anything you want to?
Well, just it's readily evident probably to the viewers that they're getting a decidedly New York City view on the topic, right? That we're kind of a bit myopic, but going back to the previous conversation on training and where in the arc of one's career evolution should the topic of fire prevention be emphasized, right? And Frank mentioned that we do present information, and the probies do get some of that in the fire academy, but it's obviously different in other places, and you and I are both aware of, I know I did some work in the past in, on national labs, and those fire departments, that's what their daily routine tends to be, right? Is going to buildings and performing building inspections, and probably a lot more in-depth and detailed than fire prevention bureaus may do in other places, right? Because that's their stock and trade. They learn, how to really well inspect fire alarm systems and water-based fire suppression systems and all the other built environment issues related to fire code compliance and maybe building code compliance. So, there's a wide arc of where that comes in. So, you're going to get that New York City centric view, which I don't know that we're a model for the in-service firefighter doing fire prevention, right? I know that we probably on a spectrum of what the daily emphasis, we're not at the top of where fire prevention falls on, the schedule or a daily emphasis. That said, as Frank alluded to, based on, Tom's question, that it is up to the company officer to flag these buildings to, maybe not develop a formal pre-plan, but to certainly, create familiarization, right? That's up to the company to be familiar with their first due. And it's an opportunity. We have a thing in New York City that, I don't know if it falls in the in the fire prevention bucket elsewhere, but critical information, dispatch system. So it's a kind of a byproduct of pre-planning where you capture truly important information relative to that building, and it will be communicated with the alarm when the ticket goes out for the fire. There'll be several lines of what's considered critical information, oddball or unique facets of the building. You'll get a little bit of an overview of its occupancy and height, construction. So if it is a lightweight construction, you should have that information. In our case, while there are certain hazards that are almost required to have pre-plans developed, those tend to be more complex, more large-scale projects like stadiums or large underground complexes, and those sorts of things are going to require a true pre-plan. But to Tom's question, that's something that hopefully the company officer, our chief officers, our battalion chiefs are constantly maintaining awareness of what buildings are going and what hazard, what's new, what haven't we seen before, and bring the company there and train, right, and become aware of it. And then there is the opportunity when the company is there to flag any concerning aspects of the environment, right? Are there any code violations that need to be flagged or dealt with, right? Remediated then or down the line.
So I'd love to get both of your views on this. That the last bunch of years, there's I think it's a Vinny Dunn actually. He tried to talk about battle planning versus pre-planning. Pre-planning, it's all about the building and all that, but battle planning, what are we going to actually do when we get there? So how do you think, does that fit in with what we're talking about? Battle planning, pre-planning, all together. And let the way it's been described and the way I've kind of discussed it is like, pre-planning is, the structure of the building, the built-in systems, all of the human elements, factors, fire drills, all that stuff. Let's just say it's a high rise, but the battle plan is when we get there, how much water, what's our fire flow? Do we need 3,000 gallons a minute, whatever it is, and how the battle plan needs to fit in with the pre-plan and the building's emergency plan all together in one thing. So do we have the opportunity to preach battle planning? And if we do, can we tie that in also to the prevention protection aspect in terms of health and safety for the firefighters? So I'm going to throw this one to Frank first.
So I would say we largely do that, right? So our pre-planning, when we go out there and we do a pre-plan, if there's a hydrant, if there's a fire hydrant that we should be hooking up to, or if there's other unique aspects to these larger buildings, right? So the pre-plans are usually the larger, unusual, irregular type buildings. So we will have integrated into that, we'll have tactical considerations. In the smaller ones that we may go and do a drill at or a training at, that's when we use, as Joe alluded to earlier, our CIDS information on that, the critical information dispatch system that we have, that we're able to get a lot of information, such as single stairway, or you need 4 lanes to get to an apartment. And then on our larger buildings, when we talk about high rise, we also have building information cards, which can have some of the building information on that that can be tactically relevant and certainly strategically relevant. So I think it's already a big part of it. And when we do the pre-plans, the companies, and typically several companies, will go and review that plan periodically. And they're definitely talking about how they would strategically and tactically attack an emergency or fire in those structures.
Joe, anything to add to that?
I certainly echo what Frank brought out, and to say that I do think that the combination of our firefighting procedures, which certainly serve as the basis, I would think, of battle planning, and New York City, I would suggest probably led the way in creating, sort of standardized firefighting plans based on a combination of occupancy type and building use and so forth. We have a set for high rise, a set for multiple dwellings, a set for private dwellings, and taxpayers, right, are 1-story, typically 1 or 2-story commercial strip mall type arrangements. So that I would guess, and I don't know the battle planning per se that Dunn writes about, but I would suggest that probably is a foundation for the battle planning. But you integrate that with any pre-plans that do exist or the SIDS. And I just want to compliment companies that are working in my division. Big issue in New York City right now, and a lot of big cities, a lot of jurisdictions are migrants, right, and trying to house migrants within the jurisdiction. And what we're finding in New York City is they're putting them anywhere and everywhere. And I'm sure, Ron, you can attest to that from the Fire Prevention Bureau's perspective. But we just received a bunch of notifications through our critical information dispatch system approval process to the division to, approve a bunch of changes, because companies are recognizing that as they're going out and doing their familiarization of their first dues, that a lot of what were formerly varied occupancy types are now being occupied as shelters. And legally or not, that's what they're being occupied as. So that's really good information for those companies coming in, right? So I really want to compliment the companies that were on the ball there and recognizing that that's no longer a multiple dwelling whatever. It's really functioning as a shelter, which is maybe some form of multiple dwelling, but certainly not from a code perspective, right? So, but I think that they mesh together to work well, right? The notion of battle planning with pre-planning, and in our case, building familiarization and so forth.
And Ron, I just want to highlight one of the points that Joe made about that, right? So he made a great point when he said it's that the foundation of what we're doing is our procedures, right? Our thousands of pages of our firefighting procedures. These pre-incident guidelines is when there's a deviation to that. And that's the importance of that. The buildings where we're going to require a deviation. So that's a great point that is our foundation for it. And the pre-incident guide highlights where we would be, deviations would be.
Yeah, just listening to both of you, what I'm thinking in the background is in the familiarization towards the pre-planning, the battle planning. Okay, it's almost pulling the fire prevention protection thing into it by default. So now they're going out to a building to look at, to get familiar with the building, to look at systems, the battle plan, where we're going to stretch from, standpipes, whatever it is. So now it almost, I hate to say it, but it almost forces our firefighters to look at those systems. Like, okay, where is the standpipe? Where is the fire pump in the basement? How do you turn it on? Where's the sprinkler valve? And all? So by virtue of the fact, it's like pulling that
the
stuff.
The day-to-day operations of a New York City firefighter. He is doing fire prevention activities, and that's how he's getting better at his craft, tactically and strategically. He may not, or she may not, view it as a fire prevention activity, because learning how to use that building pump, learning how to supply that system makes them tactically better. And understanding fire prevention, understanding why these buildings shouldn't have locked and blocked exits, all of that stuff is fire prevention and code related. But it's directly related to how we operate on the fireground. Knowing when a fire escape is going to have a gooseneck to the ladder is a fire prevention matter, but it is incredibly relevant to a firefighter operating on a fireground. And knowing that gives you tactical and strategical superiority when you understand that.
Yeah, and that's kind of in the back of my head. That's what I'm thinking. So they're actually doing it, but they don't know they're doing it. So let's not tell them, okay? Don't tell them, because they'll stop doing it. Right? I think most fire departments around the country, and I know, Joe, you have a lot of national exposure, Joe, because of your work on NFPA committees, national and international with the NFPA. But I think most of the firefighters across the country are probably doing the same thing. They're getting at, they're looking at buildings, they're going here, they're pre-planning. And so it's kind of forcing them. I'm not sure how do we get them to actually admit it, so to speak, say, well, yeah, we do fire prevention work. So maybe, I'm not sure what the magic bullet is here to kind of bring them forward and say, yeah, we're doing it anyway. Let's call it what it is, and then maybe improve upon it.
Well, I think you're trying to put lipstick on a pig there, Ron. I mean, most places you go, they're going to want to tell you, we want to go to more fires. We're going to want to do less fire prevention, less whatever else, right? But so as sexy as you want to make it sound, it's right. I think going to be viewed as a marketing push. However, right, realizing, like I had alluded to earlier, there are those departments that, that you when you take the oath and you sign your employment papers, that your day is going to be primarily devoted to, going from building to building to building, and that's it. And there's probably not going to be a plethora of structural fires, right? And thankfully, because you're probably doing a good job, focusing on what that primary responsibility is day to day, right? So, when I think about those departments, like I alluded to, national labs, and I've done work at Los Alamos. I don't know how far away you are from that, Tom, but
I don't glow in the dark.
There you go. I've been at a few of those, sites, and certainly college campuses. A lot of departments that cover college campuses. They supplement the college safety, the university safety departments or whatever. But in the case of the FDNY firefighter, or maybe the urban firefighter, celebrate it. I think don't try to hide it. I mean, those are wins, and celebrate those wins. But I do think that we can simplify, right? We can simplify or manage our expectations, might be a better way, of what are the true, what truly are those, fire prevention topics, or functionally, what do I want the firefighters when they go to do a building inspection or they're doing a familiarization? What do I want them focusing on? I don't care if they know what the travel distance is or isn't, or what the decibel level should be on a fire alarm, or spacing of sprinklers. But what are my expectations? Yeah, locked or blocked exits. I want them to know if a sprinkler is being supplied, or that valve has been shut off, or Frank made the point of section valves, right? And that's a good learning opportunity, right? When you're in there as a fire officer who may have some knowledge on how these systems work, sharing that, right? Because then at an operation, there's a way to look like a champ, right? If you remember, that, I can isolate that part of the building because I know there's a valve. It's up above, the ceiling, drop ceiling, and wherever, the exposure 1-2 corner down in the cellar, right? So I don't know if I'm making any sense, but I think that we should push it. It is a good thing to know.
It's almost simpler. I've worked in smaller jurisdictions, and it's easier to track some of that stuff. And I just wanted to comment on Frank. You talked about One Meridian. And I believe at the time that fire occurred, not only was there a problem with the PRVs in the standpipe system, but the fire department was also not responsible for inspecting any of that. I think that came out of the building department. And you guys are the biggest fire department going. How do you coordinate all that shit?
The technical term. Well, and that's a problem, right? So it's pressure reducing devices and all these, are they able to come off? Are we able to open them up? Like all of these different things, they impact us strategically and tactically. And so call it whatever you want, fire prevention, being better at your job, however it is, right? But every single day we're out there doing different things that are related to understanding and knowing the code. And as Joe said, I don't know the decibel level, so I'm glad he doesn't think I should know it. But I should know that how far the stock should be. I should know that I shouldn't have flammable, liquids in the basement, because we've we've lost firefighters to those things, as well as civilians. I should, know the pressures that I should be supplying systems, knowing that a combination sprinkler standpipe systems, knowing the section valves is critically important in those buildings. There's so many examples of the overlap of understanding fire prevention codes to be better on the fire ground when there actually is a fire or an emergency. And I think that's that tie-in. That's that M&Ms in the granola bar, right? Everybody loves M&Ms. Everybody doesn't like the granola in the trail mix, maybe, but that's that. We need more of that, and how we tie those in, and our firefighters knowing that, because our firefighters, they learn in the field. You go out with a company and they're doing building inspection, and they know how wide the aisle should be. They know even if there's a street fair, they know that they need to get the fire truck down it. That's a fire prevention code, but they know that. They know how many propane cylinders that they can have at a private dwelling, or how many at a street fair or bazaar. They understand all of that stuff, and that is all fire prevention stuff that can negatively impact the public safety as well as our safety. So they're out there doing it, and and I do think that every firefighter, no matter where you are, is doing some degree of fire prevention work when you go in, because it's just integrated into our training for so many different things. The overlap is tremendous.
Agreed. Tommy, you got something?
We know that the true value of in-service inspections and or even just pre-planning is out there, but and I think you alluded it to earlier, Ron, with a cultural shift. But I'll ask both Frank and Joe, are you seeing some of that cultural shift showing up?
Cultural shift where they want to? No, they don't want to inspect buildings.
All right. Well, there you go, folks.
Well, but I think, though, that in that regard, right, and I'll go back to, 30 many years ago, that right when I started with FDNY, and think about how seriously the function of, apparatus field inspection duty, AFID, which it was called back then, right, was taken. And it wasn't, at the top of the priority list on a typical workday, right? So very perfunctory, not taking that seriously, but you had to be out, X number of times a week, so many hours a day, and, don't get caught not being out there. So it was, kind of drudgery, right, more than anything else. And you were, praying for some runs, right, in a fire maybe or two. But today the focus, I think, is a little less on quantity and more on quality, right? And so they changed, the organization changed the rules of engagement and the expectations, and I think it is, get your work done. You get your work done, and so I think that has a lot to do with our firefighters, more embracing that role, and knowing that, we're not just going out because we have to be out for X number of hours, these 3 days a week at these times, and it's going to screw up lunch with the engine of the truck. And, no, we're going to go out, and we're going to, we got these things to accomplish, and the company officers know what the emphasis is and what they have to do. And I think that's gone a little bit, to Frank's point. Yeah, it's not the number one thing that firefighters want to do, go out and inspect buildings. However, I think that, though, that they, the message of, we're out inspecting buildings, but that could not only benefit the public, but benefit us in terms of our safety in the future. And it'll give us a leg up in terms of how effective and efficient we could be if we come back to this place at 2:00 in the morning, and the roll downs are down, and we got to force our way in and put a fire out. So I think that's improved the outcomes. I don't know if it's improved the passion for the function, but it's helped.
Yeah, and I think, honestly, our firefighters, they understand the value of building inspection, right? They'd rather be training on forcing a door. They'd rather be training on stretching a hose line. But they know, they're keenly aware of the hazards, whether it's the Atlantic Avenue fire where we lost some firefighters because bearing walls in the basement were taken out, or we're talking about the Black Sunday in the Bronx where there were illegal renovations in the apartment, in conjunction with our members not having any issued ropes that caused them to jump. So our members are aware and of the consequences when code violations or aren't up to speed, that it impacts the public, but it also impacts us as well. And I mentioned, the Vandalia Avenue, but the Macy's department store in the 1950s, a sprinkled building that it was turned off. I mean, so there's a tie-in in every decade of, fire prevention activities, not only negatively impacting the public, but impacting the FDNY and our members.
So I guess my question is how critical is the role of the company officer in all of this? Where do you see the company officer in this? To me, I think they play a pivotal role here, whether or not they're getting it from the top, whether or not the chiefs are saying, you got to do this. I think it's a pivotal role, but I'd love your opinion on this. Joe, you want to take it first on this?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I think that the company officer is the linchpin in making this work, right? Because those are the boots on the ground, right? That company led by the company officer, and it's important to lead from the front, whether you're stretching a line or you're conducting a search. In this case, you're hopefully modeling good behavior and teaching as you go, right? Presumably that company officer is, if not, the most, educated, experienced in terms of what the role is in regards to that function, certainly among the highest trained and more experienced in that regard. So it's a good, it's a teaching moment. It's a leadership moment. And, I agree that it's critical. And I think that we've seen, and I think that, Frank would agree, over the, my time, certainly the arc of 38 years, a shift, right? Like in that regard, where, the typical model was many, many, many moons ago that, we'd pull up to the front and the boss would hand you out at his window, hand you out the clipboard, right? All right, we'll see you in about an hour, right? Like, and then we, come back, we got 2 more to do. And now that, in my experience, is not the case. Like I said, the way that we've changed expectations and functionally how it's performed, I think we see more often than not the company officers leading the way. To your point, probably should be the model.
Right?
He's the quarterback. I totally agree. Joe, there's really not much to add to that. Joe knocked it out of the park. He's the officer's the quarterback, the role model, be the boss.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. I what's his name told a story recently at the High Rise Fire Safety Director Symposium down in Metrotech. Jerry Tracy did something on high rise, based on the recent book he did with Jack Murphy and Jimmy Murtaugh, but he talked about going to building, just going on runs, and having those teachable moments and trying things. He said he was when he was I think he was a captain of Ford Truck at one point, and they went into a high rise on an alarm, and he asked the fire safety director, he said, how often do you test your elevators? He goes, oh, we have a schedule and blah, blah, blah. So he takes out his key, in the city, the 1620 key. That's still a viable key, right? 1620, we still use that?
Yes.
Yeah. And he puts it into the key slot on the elevator bank, and he turns it to see if the elevators will come down, during this minor emergency. He says, actually, it was an EMS run. He says, they went there to assist. He says, and nothing happened. So I tried it again, nothing happened. So he called the fire safety director. He said, put your key in there. I think they have a 2640. It's kind of a cousin to the 1620, right? There's a cousin key there. Nothing happened. So he told the guy, all right, you got to get this fixed, So here's what the investigation showed. and so there's a company that cleans all the brass in the high rises, and they clean all that brass, once a month or whatever. And there was a caustic material in there that seeped in. It ate the tumblers inside. It ate the tumblers inside the keyhole in the slot, and the key didn't work because it was like an empty shaft in there. So the lesson learned. His thing was, every run could be a learning experience, and just trying things. And let's try the key this time, and next time let's go to the pump room and look at the valve. And each and every time we go out, and I think I'm hearing that our department does that, and I think we want to encourage everybody to do that. I had, when I was in Connecticut, we did a leadership, a 2-week program for new officers, and a couple of officers stayed back one night, and they said, our chiefs they're not big on training. They don't want us to get hurt while they're training, because if we get hurt, then they got to hire overtime, and they won't let us work out in the gym because if we get hurt, they got to hire overtime. So these guys couldn't train and they couldn't work out, which is complete opposite of what we're trying to do here in the fire service, right? So I said to them, from the training standpoint, I said, every run you go on, make it a training run. Every single run. You go to a building with a sprinkler system, you investigate the alarm, go down in the pump room, look at the fire department connection, check the OSNY valves. You got a taxpayer? Throw a portable ladder to the roof, stretch a dry line to the Siamese, whatever. Make every run, because their bosses didn't want to let them do heavy duty training because they were afraid of injury. Yeah. So make every run, and it really, that attitude really flew in the face of everything that we talked about.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. That's the opposite of a winning mindset right there. But
no
as
doubt.
a company officer, I would, if I went to a building that had an elevator and it was above 7 stories, we were going to use it, I would always recall the elevators on an EMS run. Fire service elevators, they're for us. It's even in the name that they're for us. Why would we not make sure that they're inspected? I would make sure that I would do them on many runs, because you'd find out that they're not working when there's not a fire. So that's what was one thing I definitely was not going to leave to chance for somebody else. And it was good to drill on it. Not only would I make sure they recall, but I'd also make sure that the buttons inside, when we get inside, work as well, because oftentimes you would find that there was some type of defect in there. And I don't want to find that out on game day when we have a fire.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
And let me just, talk about Jerry Tracy, right? Like, just an incredible role model, an incredible leader. And relative to this topic, I had an encounter with him as a covering captain, recently promoted, hadn't, done a whole lot of building inspection, as I had spent most of my career as a firefighter and a lieutenant in companies that didn't do building inspection. But now here I am, a captain, and taking a company out, and we were out, and I was out of the rig, and I was, with it. And so just happened to be in Jerry's battalion that particular tour, and he showed up, and you could see the big smile on his face, and just how he pumping me up for like doing my job, but yet like getting the firefighters there really motivated and, trying to build passion in their, what they were doing, and marketing the idea that this is important, and he didn't miss that opportunity. And, certainly an encounter I'll never forget. I knew him not well, but certainly, left an impression, and relative to doing building inspection, right? So
he never missed an opportunity. He never squandered an opportunity to train or to make the people around him better.
Yeah, right. Incredible experience.
Interestingly enough, there's another podcast, not part of fire engineering, but there's 2 retired guys called Getting Salty. Frank, you've been on with them yet?
Never heard of them.
Guys. Never heard of them. Okay, but they had John Esposito on. And I think you called in or you chatted in and saying, hey, this is supposed to be an hour. They were already an hour and 40 in, right?
Exactly.
And I watched the video, but he talked about working in the squad. He was in the squad with Tracy, and who else was in that squad? There was a couple of guys that worked for Tracy when they formed up the squads. He was the captain of 18.
Yeah.
And they said they were coming back. They were coming back from a run from a job. and it's 2:30 in the morning, and he tells the driver, "Stop the rig."
Yeah, that was me. I was the driver. Yeah.
Was it
Yeah.
you? Okay.
Yeah,
Because he saw a roll down. Was it the roll down
gate? He
gate?
saw a roll down gate that he'd never seen before. And
Please tell it.
He's like, "Stop
Please
the
tell
rig," and I'm like, what's going on? He's like, and then he gets out, and next thing you know, we're out there drilling, for half hour, 45 minutes on all the features of it, because the roll down was in the closed position, which is, in the Big Apple, the city that never sleeps. It's not that often that these roll downs are down, and he wasn't going to squander an opportunity for him to learn and to make sure his members learned. And to all the members working in Squad 18 that night, to their credit as well, nobody complained. Everybody was into it and made sure. I wound up early on when the squads were formed. I drove there a lot. They didn't have a lot of chauffeurs there, so my relief would be my 24 partner, Joe Vaccaro, also from 270 to come relieve me. But that's a topic for another show.
Yeah, but it's funny, Frank, because I heard the story recently, and I might have heard it from you. But then we were talking about training, and they said, talking about Tracy, and they said, yeah, 2 o'clock in the morning, you stopped to look at this gate, and but nobody bitched about it. It was important enough to look at.
Yeah,
it,
yeah. I tell you,
and I think
I've had
that's the most
many times in my career. I've had opportunities for Jerry Tracy to humble me on a call, whether it was as a firefighter, as a lieutenant. There was just many different times where he did that, where we're on runs, and he's just he's just one of those guys, right? He's always on his game, always looking to teach. And I had never heard, Joe tell that story, so that was good to hear another good training Jerry Tracy story.
Hey, if you guys don't mind me putting the shoe on the other foot, so to speak. But, we've been talking about the line firefighters getting more involved and knowing what the Bureau's doing or what they can do. How about the guys in the Bureau? What do you think they can do to kind of enhance the relationship with the operations guys?
Well, and Tom, I was, so I don't know if this, I don't know if my answer is going to, jibe with your question, but I think it's going to closely align. What I was going to try to bring up at some point is that I think for our in-service troops to be effective, it's incumbent upon leadership, department leadership, or in those organizations where you do have a fire prevention bureau that is perhaps staffed by sworn members. Who, that's their primary focus, to communicate to the operational folks, the field folks, what are specific objectives? What do we want you to accomplish when you're outperforming your building inspection, your field inspection, whatever it's termed in that department? Because just throwing a fire code at a company officer and saying, yeah, good luck, is What are the priorities? Let's limit the battlefield a little bit, right? And well define expectations. And I think that maybe if that's whether you're talking the bureau, whether you're talking the chief of department or whomever sets objectives for the department in different ways, that could be helpful, right? Because I suspect there are many places that, here's the fire code for the state of, or the county of, or the whatever, and what do you want me to enforce, right? Or are there checklists, or are there tools to help focus, the in-service company officer be successful?
Would and not knowing the culture of the two different pieces there. The Bureau and the operational end of it. Is there much social interaction? Do the guys stop by the firehouse, get a chance?
Are you talking about New York City, Tom?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, there's probably a divide, right? I think Ron would agree, because the Bureau, the Fire Prevention Bureau in FDNY is 98.8% 8%, civilian, right? And there's relatively few fire officers who are there with a specific task involving high-rise fire safety planning and the like. So, the inspectors do stop by usually a firehouse at the end of the day to sign out of their workday, but there's no, socialization, different cultures, different, different mindsets, different, But
I think to the point, right, that there should be some cross-pollination, right? When inspectors can view stuff through the firefighter's lens and a firefighter can view stuff through a fire prevention inspector's lens, I think that's important. And, and I think, Joe, I think they started under you, right? The not really firefighter for a day, but where the inspectors came to the fire academy for some training, right? So to have some basic understanding and perspective of what the firefighter is doing, looking at, thinking, because I think that is important. And we've even gone further than that now. We have some classes that we offer that there's cross-pollination happening where different members of all the different bureaus are coming in and attending class together. So that alone, on the breaks, they're talking, what do you do? Oh, I'm part of the range hood unit. What is that, right? Or I'm doing fire alarm inspections or whatever it is. And you learn different nuances and responsibilities of the job. And I think for the firefighter, it widens the aperture, and they kind of realize that there's so much more to the FDNY and what gets done throughout the organization that a firefighter that does his entire career in the firehouse may not otherwise be exposed to all of that. Where, to Joe's point, the only time he sees this inspector is when he comes to sign out. He's in the firehouse for 10 seconds, signs out and leaves. I think when you know somebody, that certainly helps. And when you understand somebody's job, it really helps.
Well, and I think we've done point, if I could just add to that, it was in play before I arrived, became chief of fire prevention, was the, building awareness, right, for fire inspectors as to the importance they play in terms of firefighter safety and health, in addition to public safety, right? We generally look at fire codes as being there for public safety, but I thought it was a really great element of the fire protection inspector training. And it went away for a short time due to budgetary reasons, but we were successful in getting it, eventually put back into the curriculum for the new fire inspector. And I think it's still there, right, Ronnie? I would imagine it's still there.
We're doing some awareness because our academy, we run our inspector academy at the Rock, so we get to do that interaction. But moreover, we've under Joe's leadership when he was chief of the bureau, we incorporated a new program of continuing education classes. So other than code, sit for 8 hours in a code refresher class. You want to put an ice pick in your ear, right? So what we did was we mixed it up, and we developed. We didn't develop a course. I got a hold of Chief Downey at the academy, and I said I want a half a day. I want a 4-hour class on fire operations for the fire inspectors. So he hired a battalion chief in from Queens, from the 5-0, a guy named Brian Russo, and he put together a beautiful program. And he said, what do you want? And I said, these are not firefighters. What do you teach a probie the first day? This is an engine. This is a truck. This is this. I said, walk them through your equipment, your procedures, and all that. It's a hit. It's out of the park. When we advertise this class, it's sold out in 10 minutes. So we've done it about a half a dozen times in the last 18 months. Russo comes, he brings another guy with him, and then after 3 hours, they go out, they go into the subway simulator, they look in there for a while, they go in a burn building, they flow a little bit of water and all. They talk about the standpipes. Here's what it looks like when it's flowing. Okay? If the standpipes aren't working right, perhaps you inspected it recently. Here's why you have to do your flow test better. And then they shut the water off in the middle of the operation to show them what it looks like when they lose water. So we've done that. Of course, we brought in the fire marshals to talk about arson investigation, the terrorism guys to talk about the scary stuff. So we're pushing the agenda from our side to get our people much more familiar with the fire operations. In addition to that, Tommy, what we've done is also under Joe's leadership, we put together a program, It's 45 minutes. It's everything you want to know about the Bureau of Fire Prevention, but afraid to ask. So we present that at every new lieutenant school. We do that at every flips class when they make lieutenant. We do it at the battalion chief's command school when they make battalion chief. It's 45 minutes. It talks about all of our units, how we do it. And I always ask them, all the audiences, have you seen the inspector come to your firehouse, whatever rank you were at the time or even now? And they all say, yes. The guy comes in at 4:30 and signs out of our journal, puts it on his timesheet. Have you ever asked that guy, let alone if he needs a cup of coffee or a bathroom, but have you ever asked him what he saw or she saw in the district that day that might be prudent to a fire operation that night? And no hands ever go up. I said, start asking your inspectors when they walk in, hey, what'd you see? Did you find any dynamite in the basement of 235 Broadway that we need to know about? That kind of stuff. So we're telling our people, also, when you knock on the door of the firehouse, how you doing? I'm the inspector. I need to sign out. And by the way, I just came from this building. If your captain's around, have him come down. He needs to notice. So we're trying to do that type of stuff. And I'm not sure what else we could be doing, but if you had other advice for the nation's fire service, so to speak.
Well, where I think that there has been a lot of inroads in terms of the, our firefighters, right? The fire officers, firefighters who are out, finding issues and looking to remediate or properly enforce the code. If I can give a plug to Joe Rogers, and I'm sure Frank knows who Joe is. He leads. I don't know if he's a chief inspector yet, or certainly is he? Okay, so he's a chief inspector now. Runs a special inspection unit, it's called, and what a great resource for the our operations folks, right? They something unusual, something unique, whether it's, recently, last week in the division I was working in, a day I was working, they discovered 270 propane cylinders in a garage of a private dwelling, and a whole bunch in a van and a truck out in front. And, for could be lieutenant's first day on the street. Oh my gosh, how am I going to deal with this? Right? Like, what a nightmare this is. Well, I think we've marketed the usefulness and the benefits of fire prevention, and more specifically the special inspection unit, such that now they know that's a resource, right? And these guys will come out and pretty much administratively handle the enforcement part of that operation, but they'll talk the fire officer through all the documentation and record keeping. And in fact, they'll even go back to the firehouse and show them how to most efficiently, enter the information for follow-up enforcement activities. So I think that's been a good learning tool for our fire officers and firefighters in the field, benefiting from the wealth of knowledge that many of our inspectors do have. So,
and we're also getting encouraging reports from our own people that when they discover a condition in a building, when they go to make an inspection, and they call the dispatcher and say, have the administrative company respond and the battalion chief. For many years, it was like, what are you breaking our chops? The meal just hit the table, blah, 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 all those things. The kickoff was at 6:00. And now they seem to be saying, thanks for letting us know. We're getting a thank you instead of a kick in the ass. So for us, it's starting to gel a little bit, and I just wondered if there was any other good tips that you could offer any fire marshal's office or fire prevention office all around the country, how they can get closer with their line people. I'm not sure, other than, without trying to intrude or does that have to come from leadership at the top? What's your thoughts on that, Frank? Anything?
I think communicate with the firefighters. Like you mentioned earlier, if you see buildings that they should be aware of, stop by and just let them know. Hey, just want to let you know, just went in this building and it was odd for whatever reason, or we're working on it, or there's a vacate on it, whatever it is, right? Let the firefighters know. And, that's, I think if you want to have a relationship with them and, have conversation, that's a pretty good way to start it, for sure.
Yeah, and I'd love to encourage the firefighters that are watching this podcast to also put out that olive branch. You know, I've always heard horrible stories. I was at the National Fire Academy years ago teaching, and I had a guy in my class. He was on the line for 30 years, this guy. You know, pretty battle-hardened guy up in New England someplace. And also big weightlifter kind of guy, huge guy, but he was getting old. So he got off the line. He went to the fire marshal's office, got credentialed. And he said, in a week or two, he says, they were looking down their nose at me. He says, I was crawling down the hall 2 weeks ago, and now they don't even want to talk. Oh, the guy's a fire inspector. He's an idiot. You know, it's like, what happened? You know, it all fell apart so fast, you know. So and that's part of that. That was an hour ago when he talked about changing the culture. That's kind of what I was alluded to. Was like, you know, you can't, you know, that stupid saying, throwing out the baby with water, but it's true. And I think, you know, for me, for the firefighters to take stock in the prevention, protection, education thing, they're taking stock in themselves, you know, and I guess maybe that starts in the very beginning when they come to the fire department to say, listen, by the way, you're going to be engaged in this stuff. It's for you.
Well, right.
And just like the fire.
Ron, if I could just jump in real fast, because I'll forget the point I want to make if you talk for another 30 seconds or so. That's how fleeting my mind is. But so the point is, right, and part of my, whatever, you know, when I speak to the new fire protection inspectors, I usually get an hour or so to stop by the fire academy and speak to them. And I think it goes to those in the fire marshal's office and those, you know, in the fire prevention bureaus or whatever we don't have a way to measure the impacts that a fire marshal or a fire inspector is going to make over his or her career, right? Like, and what do I mean? You know, how many lives are they going to save? How many civilians are they going to, you know, keep from being injured or killed? How many firefighters are they going to keep from being injured or killed, right? And how do we know that, right? But, you know, we know they are. And I think that's to that, firefighter who's all of a sudden getting, you know, looked down upon by his colleagues. I mean, that's how do you market that aspect of it, right? How do you, you know, because we can't, I don't know how you measure it, one's impact in that regard, other than I think it's kind of, you know, logical or self-evident that is an outcome of, you know, an inspector, a fire marshal who is doing his or her job is going to have that kind of impact.
There's no doubt, right? I mean, sometimes the moments that never happen matter the most. And we see the failures. We see when there's a line of duty death and we track it back because of the investigation. So we see the moments that happen, and that's the problem. It's hard to quantify it, but we know because we have moments that do happen that we can certainly deduce that there are moments that are prevented from that, whether it's your team's finding 270 propanes. I remember when, you know, cylinders, I remember when you were in fire prevention, Joe, and some of the stuff that was going on with the airbags in the car and the storage. And you think like, what a disaster that would have been. Had that been a fire in that place. Or I think about some of the illegal occupancies that were operating as these new escape rooms, right? When it was a fairly new phenomena. And, you know, what if we would have lost a firefighter in an illegal escape room or something like that? You think, you know, all the time it comes down to code. You always see these code violations, and it leads to firefighter and civilian deaths that we see later on. So there's no doubt that that there are plenty of lives being saved, both civilian and firefighter lives, by the work of anybody who's doing fire prevention activities. And that is obviously our fire prevention inspectors. That is our firefighters when they're out there doing it. It's in the whole ecosystem. Is designed to keep us and the public safe.
You know, when we do that little 40-minute class, either at lieutenant school or battalion chief school, we even did it for the staff chiefs. If you remember back about a year ago, we did it upstairs on the 8th floor. But at the end of the day, the second slide says the firefight, the men and women on the line in fire and EMS in the city are our primary customers, and I always get like a look. And I'll say, if we can make the building safe enough for you to operate in an untamed environment, imagine how safe it could be for the people who live or work there. So that's what we try to kind of convey to the firefighters, and to try to kind of invite them in and say, we got some good stuff for you. Pay attention, we'll help you out. So we're about winding down. I would love to get a summary statement, just like in the courtroom, summary statement on just the tonight's episode. We talk about fire safety education, fire prevention protection, tied into health and safety for our firefighters on the line. So so who wants to go first? I don't want to pick on anybody in particular. Anybody have a thought yet?
I'll go first. I think that, just to button this up, based on our discussion, and I know much to your chagrin, we hadn't really pre-planned a lot of how this was going to go, but
okay.
But as it's played out, and you facilitated a lot of good conversation and certainly spawned some interesting thoughts. But it's that for a fire officer, right, just from the perspective of a fire chief, fire officer, firefighter, it's part of our job, and I think that that as seriously as we take forcing a door, stretching a line, we have to value the role of. I think you said it, Ron. I know Frank said it. Tom alluded to it. We have to, what steps can we take to prevent the need to do any of that? But certainly, in light of the fact that that's inevitable, that we're not going to have, catastrophic outcomes as we are operating in, as you just referred to, that untamed environment. So it's just got to be, assume this is what we do, and we can't shirk that responsibility in our role, whether it's as a chief officer, fire officer, even, a firefighter aspiring to advance his or her career.
Great. Thank you, Joe. Frank?
It's the entire ecosystem of the fire services meshed together, and everybody has a part to play to make sure that we make moments that that happen, that we have less of those that lead to catastrophic results. And everybody has an important part to play.
Outstanding. Tommy, what do you think?
It has been my honor to have Frank and Joe on the show. I've been a big fan of the FDNY back from when I was living across the river in Jersey, and always good to talk. Frank, you and I got to sit down and talk fire history someday. It sounds like you're a wealth of information I could tap into, but I like talking about the old stuff. And again, pleasure to have both of you guys on, and stay safe.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Tommy.
Yeah, enjoyable. Yeah, thanks for the invite.
So yeah, we appreciate both of you being on with us tonight, and hopefully the folks that are going to watch this podcast make a difference. Listen to what the chiefs were saying, and write a few things down, and go in and see the boss tomorrow after you watch this and say, you know what, we could do better. There's some things we could do better. Make the fire prevention protection thing part of your annual training. Give it to your new people when they're coming through school, and let's maybe, eventually maybe we can, I won't say we change the culture, but maybe we can improve the culture and the atmosphere in the fire service. So with that, wow, that's some bell, boy. Is that your alarm clock?
No, that's a calling post that I guess won't give up until I eventually answer it.
So, Ron, you know what?
Oh,
I'm wondering, who has a home phone? So actually, that last one, I just called Joe.
Oh, that's great.
Joe,
that's great.
Joe, who has a home phone nowadays, Joe? Take it off the hook.
Oh man, how do you top that? How do we end the show now?
A little firehouse humor, my brothers. A little firehouse humor.
Perfect. Well, thanks, Joe, and thanks, Frank. Happy holidays whenever you celebrate them, whatever time of the year it is. I don't care at this point. And we'll to everybody out there.
That's Frank. Oh, that's Leeb. Yeah, it came up. That's Leeb.
No, be safe. Wear your mask.
Oh, no, I can't say that on here.
Mayday, mayday, mayday.
All right. Till we meet again on the Backstep, wear your mask, wear your seatbelt, slow down, wash your neck, take a shower after every job, and hug your kids nice and tight before you go to sleep. So with that, we'll say goodnight. Thank you, everybody. Happy holidays. We'll see you again on the Backstep. Take care.
Stay safe, everybody.
Like a trusted turnout jacket you've had for years, Flex 7 outer shell fabric delivers a perfectly broken-in feel on the very first wear. Flexible, comfortable, and powered with the strength of enforced technology, Flex 7 outer shell fabric is made to move. To learn more, visit tenkatafabrics.com/flex7. Flex 7, powered by enforced technology. Only from Tenkata